I'm Robbie Thigpen, and welcome to the Sargassum Podcast.
I'm Jenna Contuccio.
And I'm Francisca Elmer, and we are your hosts for today. We are going to share with you the latest ideas and concepts about Sargassum and Sargassum beaching events, which have become an international challenge. Let's get ready to learn together.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Sargassum Podcast. It's being brought to you by our friends at the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center at Florida International University. Really proud that they show us love and support in our work we're doing here and all. And we got a real fun day today. We got a lady who just told me that she learned to fly, or was learning to fly. And I wanted to add to it that I learned to fly too, but I do all my flying outside of the aircraft or just leaping off the television tower or something and all that kind of good stuff. But anyway, we're going to be talking to her in a few minutes. But right now, I'm just wondering where Francisca is right now, because that doesn't look like the usual background I see with her. And I want to know what's up.
Yeah, this is not my bedroom. This is actually the lab of Dr. Brigitte van Dussenbroek, and I'm here for a week doing a sargassum experiment in her mesocosm. So I'm growing sargassum using different concentrations of biostimulant that is made from sargassum. So I'm pretty much feeding sargassum juice to sargassum to see if it grows faster here in Puerto Morelos.
Cannibalism.
Not really. It's a plant, so I don't know if we can call it cannibalism. Or it's an algae.
Well, I think a vegan would call it cannibalism. So what else? Have you done anything interesting this week, Jenna?
Not really. Just waiting to hear some good news about funding for my graduate school project. Not sleeping, normal stuff like that. How about you, Robbie?
Very, very nice. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I did something kind of fun. Well, I did something kind of fun this week. I met with a professor at the university in Chiapas, and they're going to develop some university level material for us to use for our biocultural project on primates, for primates of southern Mexico. And just yesterday, I met with a guy in Ecuador, and they're going to start using our scarlet macaw material down there with a couple of the indigenous people, and we're going to see how that works out. And also, the university is going to provide us some additional university level materials that or content we can use, and we're still in discussions about that. So, I had a couple of exciting things happen to us this week.
Yeah, Robbie, isn't it cool how you can meet with people from different countries within the same week without even leaving your house?
Well, I texted a colleague of mine in Playa del Carmen this week. So, I just had a meeting in Chiapas, and I would have thought they would have known if I was in Mexico. And she responded to me, "Oh, are you in Chiapas?" And I'm like, "No, I'm on Zoom." And I don't know what was up with that, but yeah. So that's kind of cool because I know this person would have known I'd been if they'd known I'd be getting some posh to bring back over there to Quintana Roo if I had been in Chiapas.
Yeah, and this technology also makes it possible for us to do our podcast and to talk to Kim today. So I want to introduce our guest of today, Dr. Kim Baldwin. She is the Director of Marine Spatial Information Solutions, which provides environmental mapping, analysis, and planning services, as well as practical training courses in the use of geoinformatics, drone technologies, as well as participatory mapping and data collection strategies. Her work aims to strengthen the capacity of nonprofits, the public sector, community groups, small businesses, and scientists to leverage technology to work together and play a part in environmental management. She is a marine ecologist that has lived in the Caribbean for the last 20 years and has worked at Cermes University of the West Indies for most of that time or all of that time. Currently, she is a research associate that actively advises and guides the department on geospatial, drone and participatory mapping and IT. Since 2016, she established, trained, and oversees the drone unit at Sargassum. Welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thank you. Thank all three of you for having me on and for that great introduction. Yeah, thanks a lot for having. I'm really excited to be here and talk to you about what I've been doing with drones and Sargassum.
We're very excited to have you. Thanks so much for being here today to learn with all of us. The first question we ask everyone on the podcast is, what is Sargassum to you, Kim?
Okay, that's a great question for me because I'm not, my specialty isn't Sargassum. Sargassum to me, though, is a great opportunity. I know it's a threat, but I'm taking that threat and I'm viewing it more as an opportunity. That's the way I like to view the world and the environmental challenges we face. It's all about balance and equilibrium and trying to make the best with all these curveballs that keep get thrown at us, especially with, Sargassum is a climate change issue. So, it's learning how to make these threats opportunities. So that's really what Sargassum is to me. At least that's the lens I choose actively to see it as. And we'll talk today about how I believe my work helps move Sargassum from threat to opportunity.
It is all a question of balance, isn't it? And yeah, I thank you for using that particular language and all. But how did you get involved in this type of work? Why sargassum? I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. Like I just mentioned, my interest wasn't initially in Sargassum. I actually it was annoying to me, just like everybody. When it came onto the scene, it was just like at that point, I think we were more focused on lionfish, marine spatial planning, all these other things. And then it was like Sargassum. So how I got involved, like I said, I was sort of anti-Sargassum in the beginning. I just didn't want to deal with it with everything else. But one day, as you guys mentioned, I work at Cermes. I'm a research associate, and I've been there for 20 years doing mapping, monitoring, and field work in particular. And one day I went out with Hazel Oxenford. I think that was about 2017, 2018, when we really had bad influxes. And I assisted her one day in the field with the conventional field surveys she was doing, trying to understand the species, the abundance, and we were laying quadrats and doing a more conventional monitoring, mapping and monitoring approach. And we spent hours on the East Coast in the blazing sun with buckets and sargassum, and I call it the Sahara Desert out there on the east coast of Barbados. It's rough and it's hard to get to logistically on the beach, and then it's this massive length of beach. So I went out there and saw what they were doing, and on our drive back to the university that day, I just shook my head at Hazel, and I was like, this is ridiculous what you're doing. I could do this so much faster and more accurately with drone technology. And so that's sort of where my involvement began. Then Hazel I should have never said it because at that point, I didn't really have a choice. Hazel at that point was on me to become part of this Sargassum research. And at that point in 2018, I agreed that I would co-supervise a master's student at Cermes. And so Joseph Weeks, who still works with Hazel and I today on the Sargassum monitoring protocol, we all embarked on this first attempt of how can we use drones to map and quantify the abundance of sargassum washing up onto the beaches in Barbados. And why I really thought that this was drones, besides drones what I use drones for is you can take a drone, you can fly an ecosystem, fly an area, and while the drone is flying, I can real time map that ecosystem. And not just map looking down and having like an ortho mosaic or a visual image, but also a 3D model. So drone photogrammetry software actually allows you to fly an area, and if you get enough pictures that overlap, it can triangulate X, Y, which is your GPS location, but also Z, height, elevation. And that's where I was like, Hazel, all we have to do is fly this beach, create a 3D model, and then use conventional GIS to do something called image classification, where you basically tell the GIS program, these brown pixels are sargassum, these yellow pixels are sand, the blue pixels are sea, the greens, coastal vegetation. And you can classify this image, create a 3D model, and then basically lift out the 3D part where the sargassum is, which would give you volume. So you think about that, and logically, that's not that hard. It's a pretty easy workflow. But the difference is, the reason why this has taken us from 2018 to now to crack this, or it was 2020 that we finally cracked this, was that the beach is a very complex environment. In a traditional, let's say, volumetric calculation like that with image classification, you're working on, let's say, a construction site where the ground never changes. But on a beach, as we know, it's slanted, but also so in order to calculate volume, you have to have your ground surface and your elevation. But on a beach and in a normal traditional, let's say, construction site, your ground, the earth never changes, right? The floor is the floor. Maybe you dig out, but it doesn't change. But the sea, as we know, with the tides that come in and out, your ground surface and the sargassum surface changes with every tide. So twice a day in Barbados, we're getting a new ground surface, a new elevation besides what's washed up, what's washed down. So time-sensitive information is very important with sargassum. But then also when I started getting into sargassum, management and how are we going to use it, which is my more interest, is not so much the biological composition of what are we going to do with this? Then I found out there's a lot of products that are under development that are also time critical. The sargassum has to be fresh if it's dried out. So again, I was like, drones, I can do this real time, because if we need to be collecting this within 6 hours, let's say before the next tide, after it washes up, we need to be creating information basically in real time so that we can actually send it to markets and get rid of this in real time. And that's where I was like, drone technology is not just for the map. It can help us with the whole workflow, from understanding the abundance to getting the product out, and this market supply demand issues that were so critical for many of the sargassum applications or products. So that's how I got involved.
There's a great story on how you got involved. And yes, I've done 3D mapping of coral reefs, and I know exactly how hard it is and how hard it is to then actually make volumes out of stuff. And I also know how the beach changes and how the sargassum changes depending on the tide. And then maybe some of it is actually still as a mat outside in the water. And yeah, I think even with drones, as you said, it's still tricky to do this, but definitely easier than walking around with buckets on the beach.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, so initially, like I said, I started in 2018, and that was just like, can we use drones in GIS? And then I think it was like maybe the next year is when we applied for this Sargadapt grant. And so the challenge got a little greater, because we said we want to be able to not just figure this out, we want to be able to do this across the region using local help and capacity. And so it was like, okay, how are we going to do this, and what kind of tools can we use that we can actually implement this across the Caribbean? So that, again, GIS is a very technical skill. It requires a lot of money, data handling, analysis. So what I really focus on is simple, easy to use. That's what I guide the university on. That's what my company is about, is what off the shelf, easy to use technology that's relevant for my stakeholders in terms of our capacity, our finances, our data. So that was the other sort of thing we had to figure out, was how can we not just create this workflow, but how can it be simple enough that we can actually launch this and use this on a regional scale across the Caribbean, which I knew was going to be a challenge, because I've been teaching GIS and drones in the Caribbean for 15 years now. So when we started, Hazel thought it was impossible. And because the advances in technology and computers today, it has become a reality. And that's why I'm really excited about this protocol. I mean, every month, every year, things are getting cheaper, easier, quicker, and more accessible to, the Caribbean.
That is really good news. So what would people need to use your protocol? Like, what kind of skills do they need? What kind of equipment do they need?
Yeah, I think it's probably first. Yeah, so the protocol itself is what we've developed is a standardized drone-based Sargassum monitoring protocol. So this protocol, which we've developed, is a drone monitoring survey, but the main app. So I think important, just if we back up, when you're using drone mapping, when I'm teaching, whenever I'm working with anybody, the number one thing you need to figure out is what is your application, because there's different methods and different data you need depending on what is your application. So for this protocol, I want to be very clear. Our application overall was Sargassum management. Okay, management and monitoring. So maybe the overall, whether it was Hazel was interested in collecting the data to understand and validate forecasting models. That was one thing that we were looking at. We were also looking about the abundance that was washing up onto the beaches. But then the thing that I was always very interested in was the market. How are we going to use these products? How can this data be fed to the entrepreneurs? So the Sargadapt project that this is funded by, we look at biological, we're looking at the social impacts, we're also looking at the economic impacts and the entrepreneurial uses. So there's many components of our overall product. So our first application that we wanted to focus on, so overall it was all of those, but then we had to develop a monitoring protocol that was focused on something a little more specific. So we've developed an overall mapping protocol to create a map of the area. And then we've developed methods. This specific protocol that Hazel and I've developed is the methods for quantifying the abundance of beached sargassum. So that is one arm, and that's the protocol that I'm here talking to you about today. We also have been doing research looking at the biodiversity. So we have underwater drones looking at the biodiversity as well. We could be using the drone mapping protocol for what another project component of Sargadapt and my personal passion and experiences is participatory mapping. So using these maps to work with communities to map problems and issues and maybe solutions. So there's different applications, but this first protocol, I know I keep going back to it, is really focused on the biological, the abundance, understanding the quantity washed up onto a beach. So to get started with this protocol and to create an overall drone map of the ecosystem, we've kept it very simple. That was always the goal of this project. So one, all you really need is a team of, so we wanted it low resources, 2 people. If you have 3, great, but the minimum is 2 people. The other things that you need on the beach is what we call it a pokey stick or a PVC pipe. So everything we've made that you could besides the drone, you can make at home. So a quadrat, a 1 meter by 1 meter metal quadrat, or you can make it with PVC, a PVC 1 meter stick that's got like centimeter marks just with a Sharpie pen. So again, in our user's guide, we discuss what it is, and a transect tape is all you need for the more field equipment, and a drone. Now, you don't necessarily our protocol can be applied without a drone. So I think I want to make that very clear. It doesn't have to use a drone. We've figured out a very simple way that you can also get the rough and dirty estimate of, well, not even rough and dirty, a pretty good estimate, because we did a lot of field surveys with drones and measuring with buckets. You can still do this protocol without a drone. So we should make this clear. You can use our protocol with the user's guide that is being released or that has just been released without a drone. But otherwise, all you need is a off-the-shelf DJI drone. You could use any drone that does mapping, but we're recommending DJI drones. And then the other big piece that we have is the drone mapping software. So I have partnered with Drone Deploy, which is based in San Francisco, California. And Drone Deploy has given Sargadapt and myself and UWI a drone license for processing sargassum data for all of our teams. So we have the 5 in the Caribbean for under Sargadapt, but now I'm teaming up with Canary, Saramizes, and so we've got 3 more countries. So any of the Sargassum monitoring teams can actually use this free drone mapping software. So that's all you really need to do the whole protocol.
So you sort of touched on this a little bit, but you primarily developed this method or this protocol for ecological surveys, but what other applications can it be used for?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenna. So like I mentioned, other applications would be validating forecasting models. The other application that I was focused on, or that Patrick McConney at Cerames is very focused on, is using them for the sargassic management plans and monitoring the implementation of management strategies, understanding the effectiveness of management strategies, also using it for planning, collection and disposal, so mitigation, disaster risk management applications as well. This can be used for. And what I'm really excited for, and the way I see this drone technology, especially the drone deploy technology being leveraged, is using the data. So where we're able to fly the area, real time map the area. And as I mentioned before, we were using GIS initially in 2018. As this protocol is developed, I found a way to cut ArcGIS completely out of this, where we are using geospatial tools that are pre-built in web-based mapping dashboards, so drone deploy. So there's a way, and I'm using the pre-built-in tools of drone deploy that are made for construction and agriculture, not really made for sargassum, but they're image classification for agriculture. It's called a plant health tool. That picks up sargassum. And then I'm using some of the construction tools that are built for quantifying volume, using that from drone deploy as well. So we've chained together different pre-existing tools that are very simple to use, that I train people in less than a week, from learning how to fly to how to do a mapping and monitoring, how to process, in 5 days. And these are all types of stakeholders, Jenna, from I've taught fishermen who can barely read and write, that can text, pretty much text only literacy, all the way to people with PhDs, how to use this protocol. So it's very simple, user friendly. It's all using your smartphone. You need a desktop connection just to upload the pictures, but all the planning and analyzing and reporting could happen on your smartphone or your iPad if that's needed. So that's really why this protocol for me is so excited, is that I have realized that GIS, because I've been teaching GIS for years and years at the university, is very hard to use for many people. And it's really not, we wouldn't be able to launch this regionally on a GIS. The GIS would have been our bottleneck. The analysis, where do we host the data? How do we share the data? How do we process the data? So the great thing, again, about using this drone deploy or software as a service is that it provides us the infrastructure that many countries in the Caribbean don't have. We've got the cloud-based remote sharing environment, as well as these built-in geospatial tools that make this whole process easy. So our drone monitoring protocol leads you through the whole step, from how to plan a site, how to go out, collect the data, how to process the data, and then more importantly, how to use that data to create information and inform decisions in near real time. That's why I love this project. This is a whole turnkey solution. And so my dream, and what I'm really excited about this year, is how we are going to be launching this across the region. We're starting with 5 countries this summer under Sargadapt training, and there's several other grants that have just been approved that have reached out to me. And we will be doing additional training. As I mentioned, the Sargadapt is focusing on the estimating the abundance, but also the other projects that I'm very interested in is working with entrepreneurs and understanding being able to provide more information on our market supply and demand, and especially those sort of time critical uses. I know, there's certain bioactive ingredients in sargassum that the sargassum has to be fresh. It can't be the old crunchy stuff up on the beach. So how can we fly an area, use the cell data, or go into a Wi-Fi and beam to the client and let everybody know, hey, because as we all know, not every beach has the same amount of sargassum. You might have a small cove beach that maybe only has enough sargassum for the face soap person. And maybe you have a long stretch of beach like Walker's, and that's good for biofuel. It's got tons and tons of sargassum. So you need to understand not just abundance, you need to understand, how much quantity is there and what the appropriate application. So my dream as we move forward over the years is we've created this base monitoring protocol is to keep building and expanding on this for the various uses. And what I want is how are we going to take this threat and how is it going to become an opportunity? That's when I will smile and say, we've done it. We still got a little ways to go, but I'm pretty positive and I'm really hopeful. And I'm really excited about the support we've gotten across the region from grant funders, but also from Drone Deploy. I know I keep plugging them, but I really have to because this is very expensive software and they've generously given it to all the countries in the Caribbean that want to participate with us on this.
I absolutely love interviewing people that love and are passionate about their work and all. So I really appreciate talking with you today. Thank you. And all. But you make it sound like just regular old folks can use this, or people with very advanced degrees can use this. How can people learn to do this kind of stuff? And I think we'll probably have some clips in the some links in the clip description to send us to some of this stuff. Correct?
Yes, definitely. I'm going to set, I have a sign up sheet. Again, I haven't started the online course training, but I have a link that'll be included that if anybody's interested in being part of the email list so that when we release these courses, you can be the first in line. But yeah, Robbie, back to your point, really my whole objective, my company, what I'm really passionate about is really making it simple I've been in the Caribbean for over 20 years. I did my master's and my PhD there. And I've really always focused on is keeping it simple. The reason why when I teach at the university, sometimes the students say, oh, well, if we were in the US, we'd have all this money to do all this. And I say, no, you guys are learning to think out of the box. We're using PVC pipes. We're using fishing knowledge. We're using the tools and the best tool that you have. People ask to say about drone. Well, what's the best drone? The best drone's whatever drone you have. Use what you have. And that's what this whole approach has been. And the more I realize it's like, we need to make things simple and easy to use for a wide audience. And that really is what I strive to do. So I have developed, multiple training classes, but this training class in particular. So we've got our user's guide, which is already available for download. We will be launching training classes. And we have also the Ceremes website. I think that's got a lot of other Sargassum resources as well.
Yes, I highly recommend the Ceremes website as well. It has so many good resources. It also has a repository of all the, or almost all the papers on Sargassum, which I find super, super helpful when I look for papers and stuff. So Ceremes has done an incredible job of bringing together resources on their website, and I tell a lot of people about their website when they want to learn about Sargassum.
Great.
So when you go out as a drone unit or a team with capital letters. Can you tell us a bit about what a drone unit is? It sounds like something out of the military, but I assume it's
I
not.
know it's. I think that for anyone that's starting with drones, a lot of people want to get started. I think in terms of environmental mapping and monitoring, like I said, I do training for all different types of applications, not just Sargassum. You need to understand that drones are a great tool, but it's really important that you operate on a professional level. So I have a commercial drone license. I'm a Part 107 pilot here in the US. I'm also a drone thermographer, which means I'm certified to fly drones with like thermal sensors. And then I have 6 Caribbean licenses in different countries for drones. So I spent my first project actually was in 2016, developing a drone training curriculum for the Nature Conservancy and developing a drone operating policy. So in 2016, I spent, and since then, I've spent a lot of time researching professional drone operations based on my training, becoming a Part 107, but also the US, as we know, is the US, but there's the UK and the British Australian system, which is a lot more Caribbean centric. So I learned all about the protocols and the operating procedures and what the international policies were. And so I have developed and uh, what because a lot of the Caribbean countries don't have drone policy quite yet, we've developed an overall. So in the US, let's just start with the US. In the US, in order to fly commercially, so commercially means that you are flying more than a recreational flyer. If it's for research, if it's for YouTube, you're flying commercially. If you're flying a drone for anything for work, even if you were trading your drone flight for a free movie ticket, technically that's commercial. So in order to get permission to fly commercially in most countries in the world, you have to follow certain commercial standards showing that you have safety protocols in place. So that is what a drone team or a drone unit comprises of. It's you have commercial standards in place. So we have an internal policy at Cerames, and I help companies set up what their internal policy is. So what their rules are. Just like if you had a boat, you have operating procedures. It's your standard operating protocols. What is the rules for flight conduct? What's your flight permission process? Who has to be involved in the data collection or the processing? So it basically lays out commercials. They're called SOPs, but standard operating procedures, and it shows everybody sort of their roles and responsibilities. So our drone unit in Barbados, for example, at Cerames, we've got about 12 people now. So it started with myself and one other person back in 2016. Now we have a team of about 12 people. And so all of those people are not necessarily pilots out flying. We've got academics, Hazel Oxenford, and another couple professors that are interested in more the data and the geoinformatics. They are more the academic leads that help identify what are the applications. But then we also have myself. I'm more of an overall coordinator, directing the team. I'm liaising between what the applications are and what the data is and what the team is. And then we have a crew. So these are my field people. These are the crew I spent training. We have commercial, so it consists of a pilot, an engineer, and an observer. So every time we fly at Cerames, technically we have 3 people that go out and fly. So they're more in charge. I might approve the mission, but they probably will go out and plan the flight and the surveys, or maybe we'll do it together. And then we also have like the director who oversees the overall. Sometimes we have to make a decision. Somebody will ask us to fly a mission that is too high of a risk, or, we don't have big money. We don't want to take it somewhere off the North Coast out to check for birds, or maybe the principal at the university wants to do it for he wants a 3D model of his house. That's not appropriate. So you need to have these procedures in place. So a drone unit and really any person flying drones should think about. And so when I do drone mapping and monitoring training, I require my teams to spend this like a 5-day learning how to fly safely, how to fly professionally, how to implement and use and follow standard operating procedures, not just for the flight, but how to process. And my biggest thing being a geospatial person is data, how to download the data, how to organize, manage the data, how to, share the data, what those procedures are. So our operating procedures are not just how to fly a drone. It's also that back end, which I think as a scientist, I'm sure you all can agree, is the most important part. You have bad data, you're gonna make bad decisions, and so everything else isn't worthwhile. So that's what a drone unit is. That's our team. We work together. Like the bigger team might meet quarterly. We have weekly meetings with our drone unit. We've got a drone calendar so everybody can see, or maybe make, and then, a request process. So any of the lecturers, if they wanted to use it for teaching or research or something else, they have a process now. So, yeah, that's what a drone unit comprises of. And I think it's a very important consideration that you don't just go out there and think you're going to fly a drone without understanding those basics first. So that is, for this upcoming training, the Sargassum training, that is a prerequisite of doing the Sargadapt training. I've, like I said, been training for 5 years. I probably trained 300 to 400 people across at least six different countries in the Caribbean over the last 5 years. So our first batch of people that are going to be trained for Sargadapt are people that have already undergone this 5-day training in the 5 countries. So we'll be training 5 people 10 people in each of these 5 countries, but all of them have done my prerequisite. They know how to fly drones. They know how to manage data. They know how to operate safely and get, their drone permissions. So I think that's all really, I'd like to bring that point home. You don't just go out there and fly. You really need to understand safety, and safety comes first. If we go out there one day and the wind's too high, it doesn't matter how bad we want to fly the drone, we pull the plug. We have operating procedures that determine what is that tipping point where it's not safe anymore.
Safety should always be a consideration. We really appreciate that. We pushed the envelope one time, and we jumped out of an airplane, and we were the last people ever to jump out of that plane because after we landed, it crashed, and all. So yeah, safety should always come first.
So, in your eyes, what is the role of technology, or what roles can technology play in environmental or marine sciences?
Thanks, Jenna. I see technology. This is me, but technology to me, again, is a tool. It's an amazing tool that can make our job so much more efficient and effective. Um, I pride myself, and I think my students love me because I'm a marine biologist by trade. I'm a fisheries biologist. I'm into participatory. I'm a social girl out on this, fishing village talking to people. I'm more of a people person than techie person. Um, so I love technology, and I love teaching technology, to show people that it doesn't have to be hard. And I think that when I teach it, I can explain it in a way that's not too technical because that isn't my background. So I just see tech, and I'm always looking for different ways. As I mentioned, tech can be retooled. We don't have big money. We don't have any money in the Caribbean. In most of my projects, as we all know, grants are like so stretched. So again, I could have tried to take this approach in this really geospatial, no. And it's, again, taking the time to research. What my company really specializes in is taking the time to research off the shelf tech that exists for other industries and figuring out how to re-leverage it for environmental purposes, whether it's climate change or fisheries or sargassum, or disaster risk management or agriculture. Right now I'm using drones for agriculture mapping and monitoring and natural food security. So I think the other exciting thing about tech, especially drone mapping, is that you might go out and we're creating these maps, like as I mentioned, for the abundance, but these same maps and the same protocol can be retooled for mapping and monitoring for local knowledge, or assessment of a management strategy as it works. So that's why I see. I think that we should be very open to tech and science because to me they're just like synergistic. It just helps us do things. And I'm just amazed how fast we're able to do stuff that and on the level that we couldn't even a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, thank you for that. One of the big aspects of the research that we're doing, marine conservation out of borders, is we're combining Western science with local ecological knowledge systems because we think it's stronger that way. And so I really appreciate the way you talk about things like that. But you're a big believer in engaging people in science and decision making with a diverse background, and just all kinds of people, and all and so how do you translate this stuff into everyday life?
Okay, so yeah, I think Robbie, a good way. Okay, so I think Robbie, a good way to lead into that would just sort of be my experience and my background. So as I mentioned, I started doing mapping and monitoring and GIS data collection over the years, and I realized the more I worked on marine spatial planning projects and all these really cool projects that we were collecting all this great information, but people weren't really using it. We were collecting and creating all this geospatial information and, under great grants. And then grant funders would get upset because they're saying, well, people aren't using all this GIS data. People aren't using this. And what I realized the more I worked is that we were falling short as scientists. We were not building the capacity amongst people. So I was mapping local knowledge, Robbie. I was working with communities and we were mapping all their information to create marine spatial plans, which were very great plans, but then they weren't being the data wasn't being used to inform decisions actively on the ground. And the more I worked on these projects, the more I realized, hey, what are you doing, Kim? Because we're not focusing. It's great to collect this data. So then that's where I pivoted in my career and started about 2012 focusing on participatory mapping and training and capacity building. So I think, Robbie, that's really where it's translated to my everyday, is that my focus on my career really pivoted into teaching, training, and capacity building and showing people and hiring, let's say, communities, coastal communities to work to collect data with me, to show them the role that they can and should be playing in environmental management, rather than telling people, engaging people. So involving people. And that's why I love the Sargassum monitoring protocol so much, is that it is a mechanism that you get this visual 3D image of your ecosystem, and you can go out to the communities, and you can go out and you can discuss it with people, and you all have the same visual of what's happening real time. So that's how I translate my work, I guess, into every day, is that I realized, hey, my focus needs to be, and it is, and I only take on projects at this point in my career. Luckily, I'm old enough at a point now that I can focus primarily on this sort of capacity building and uh, not just collecting biological data either, really the social and the economic and the more holistic data set, which I believe is the only way that we can actually create effective, sustainable development is collecting all that data.
Awesome. I think the world needs more people like you, because we're not communicating to the general public, then we're just spinning our wheels, and all it's a big waste of time. And so I appreciate the way you engage just regular folks and all that. Thank you so much for that. Um, but we've enjoyed talking with you today and learning from you, and we'll let you know when this comes out. And just we really appreciate you sharing your day with us, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. It was really nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. This was really exciting to learn about your work and just to see how passionate you are about involving the community in the Caribbean. It's really neat. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you guys for having me on, and I'm thanking you from Professor Hazel Oxenford, who is, I have to give her credit. I know I've been the one here on the call, but she is the PI of the project. She is the brainchild. She is the one that knows everything about sargassum. I am no sargassum expert, but she was also my PhD advisor as well. So I work with her very well, and I definitely love and respect her. And I also I need to make sure that I give credit to the funders of this project, which was the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund,
Woohoo!
the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, and the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety, KFW, is the funders of the Sarg Adapt project. So I definitely need to thank them.
Yeah, well, we want to thank them for allowing you to be here with us today and giving you the tools you need to share this with us.
Yeah, great. And I hope that I'll be back sometime soon telling you about the next iteration or another sub protocol. So this, as I mentioned, version 1 is out now, which is understanding and estimating the volume of beach sargassum. And the framework has been laid to build onto this. And I am in talks with some other people about how we can have maybe volume 2 be participatory mapping. And maybe volume 3, 4, and 5, depending on what other applications are out there. So I see many aspects of sargassum management and monitoring using this protocol. And that's why we built this, so that it would be able to be leveraged in multiple ways, not just for our initial purpose.
So what did you think about our interview today?
Wow. Sin palabras, solamente wow. ¿Y tú?
Definitely. I love how enthusiastic Kim is about her work, and it is really so much fun to interview someone who is just so passionate and excited. And it's really neat to see, just even as the beginning of this podcast, how far along we've come with science and technology around sargassum. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and I love that, she could be a technology nerd who wants to use the drones in the most complicated way to make the most perfect beach survey, but instead she's really down to earth, and she has lived a long time in the Caribbean, and during that time she realized that if this is going to be a tool for everybody, which it should be, then it needs to be as simple as possible, and you need to train people. I love that she has capacity training at the heart of it, that people are learning new skills, and that she's doing it in a way that you can actually use it in the Caribbean. I think that was my favorite part of how she's working and how she's doing stuff.
Yeah, that was a very amazing interview. Her enthusiasm, I think, is infectious and all, and I really appreciated that too. And all. Well, anyway, I hope you learned something today with us, and we certainly did. And I'll appreciate you. You could have been anywhere on the planet today, but you decided to spend a few minutes with us, and we appreciate your time. And once again, we want to thank the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center from Florida International University for bringing us here today, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Oh, and don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think.
Thank you for tuning in today and learning with us from our guests. If you want more information about what our guests talked about today, check our show notes for links and information in our archive. And don't forget to like and share our podcast with your friends.
If you enjoy our podcast, please consider supporting us financially by becoming a Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can support us and get the exclusive benefit of submitting your questions for our interviewees before the interview.
The Sargassum podcast is produced by Marine Conservation Without Borders and is made possible with financial support and consideration from the Kimberly Green Latin America and Caribbean Center, U.S. Department of Education Title VI grant. It is produced by Jose Martinez, Alex Daniele, Cleo Maridakis, Francisca Elmer, and Eloise Lopez, and is hosted by Robbie Thigpen, Francisca Elmer, Jenna Cantuccio, Florence Menez, Cleo Maridakis, and Paula Diaz.
We will be back in 2 weeks with another exciting guest. The music for this podcast is from the song Them I Pray by Drizzle, the Round Drama, an artist from Rotterdam. Follow him on Spotify and YouTube for more music. But for now, this is the full song Them I Pray.